This is the Dery Brothers Tribecast, a podcast for diehard Cleveland Indians fans. Presented to you by WaitingForNextYear.com. Now, here are the hosts, Matt and Todd Dery.
All right, here we go, everybody. It is time for another installment of the Dery Brothers Tribecast, brought to you by our friends at WaitingForNextYear.com, the Center for Advanced Dentistry, Raising Cane's Chicken. I mean, we're all over the place. Today, Matt and Todd are joined right away. We're not even doing an intro and then introducing a guest. Our third wheel today, the great Zack Meisel from The Athletic. I almost said Cleveland.com, Zack. I'm sorry. The Athletic, author, big-time sports personality in Cleveland. Todd, what an honor to have Zack on this afternoon here as we talk. Who knows where we're going with this thing?
Why waste time talking to me and listening to my bullshit? Let's get right into it with the author himself.
Zack,
welcome.
You guys are really humble, because when I saw you were one of the top 25 podcasts in Cleveland.
Here we go.
I saw that and I was like, I got to get on this show.
Well, you've been on before. It's not like you haven't been on before.
Yeah, but I feel like that was when it was in its infancy and people hadn't really realized what greatness you guys put out there on a weekly basis. And I mean, it shows. You said all your sponsors, like, people are lining up. They want a part of it.
We're no what's the fireworks place that's on Dre Knott's pod?
Is this like American Fireworks or something?
Yeah, American Fireworks.
American Fireworks.
They'll be net.
Honeymoon Grill. They just got free plugs here, so they've got to be doing something right.
What I love,
they got nothing. First of all, they got nothing on the Center for Advanced Dentistry and Dr. Ben Hornstein. That's the truth.
Zack, are you a convert yet? Are we going to get you over to Dr. Ben?
You might, because I was telling Todd yesterday, the fact that I know his name and know his place, just like, I've memorized that. It's been ingrained in my memory. So, yeah, I might have to. Are they working again? Are we allowed to go see dentists now?
See, if you would have listened to the last pod when I read his Dr. Ben's new guidelines, he is opening up on May 15th, I believe, and he's got very specific and strict guidelines. Zack, I told him that you were going to be on the pod, and his response to me was he was very excited to have you, and he said that tell Zack that the Todd Dery VIP room at the Center for Advanced Dentistry is waiting and available for him.
That's pretty incredible. I listen to every second of your guys' podcast. It's more a matter of, I don't know what day of the week it is.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think they all run together. Of course, Zack also the co-host of the Selby's Godcast, the original Cleveland Indians podcast. And Zack, it's been obviously a whirlwind here. We're sitting here in mid-May, close to mid-May, no baseball. There's some talk of a plan coming together now. Of course, Tony Clark, the players' union, going up against the owners. Where's your head at right now? Are we going to have baseball? When do you think it's going to happen? And what have you been doing to pass the time?
I think we will. I think baseball knows there's too much at stake. Like, you have to get out of your own way at some point. And no one is even talking about the fact that the collective bargaining agreement expires after next year. And so they're going to have to come to more agreements and straighten everything out again in a year and a half, or else you might not have baseball in 2022. So why take the extra risk now? And when you are this close and you know what it's going to require to get back on the field, you have to just meet in the middle somewhere and make sure it happens. And I think everybody involved is smart enough. I think the owners have done a good job of kind of playing this out publicly so that maybe the pressure gets put on the players. But whatever happens, I still lean toward there being baseball. It's going to be a little strange with expanded rosters, a shortened season, a weird schedule, regional schedule. And who knows, if the season starts in early July, that's 6 weeks away, who knows what the landscape of the country and the virus is going to look like at that point. So there's a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of hurdles to clear. I still think cooler heads prevail in the end, and we'll get something. And I think something is better than nothing. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm growing tired of staring at screens in my house every day, and at least the weather's finally warming up, so that'll, increase everyone's the possibilities they have throughout their day and boost everybody's moods. But yeah, I'm ready to watch something on TV besides the Chicago Bulls, I think.
Which isn't a bad thing. I know I'm enjoying it, thank God. But let me ask you a question. Of all of these plans that you have heard, whether it be this 3-division plan, that Florida-Arizona plan, or the 4-state plan, or playing in home parks close to, just basically Central versus Central, interleague, what do you think is the most viable if you had to take a guess?
I think it's the current one. I thought when the Arizona plan leaked at the beginning, the idea of placing, 5,000 people in a bubble in one town and trying to keep everybody safe and healthy and on the proper regimens, that seemed like an impossible task. This at least seems more doable. Now, there's going to be more risk involved. You're going to have to make sure you have adequate testing and you have contingencies in place in case someone contracts the virus. But there are a lot of possibilities. I don't know what they're going to do with the schedule, but if you're going to keep it to regional games where the AL Central will play the NL Central and you'll play your own division, well, then maybe it makes sense. The Indians can knock out the Cubs and White Sox in one trip, and then you limit how much you're traveling and getting on a plane or getting on a bus or going to a new place. Maybe we can have longer series than just 3 games. Maybe you can have longer homestands and longer road trips. There are ways to do this that seem more viable than sticking everyone in 1 or 2 cities or 1 or 2 states and just hoping for the best. But again, it's the amount of time between now and July 1st or July 4th, whenever it would be, it's pretty similar to the amount of time from when spring training shut down to now. And think about everything that has evolved and changed over the last 2 months. It's impossible to predict where this is going because we couldn't have predicted back in earlier mid-March, or maybe some people could have, that we'd be where we are now. So it's tough. I think that's the other thing too, is the league and the players, they can settle all this and get the agreements in place. And it's it ultimately comes down to the safety and the health and what the virus has planned for everybody.
Zack Meisel, our guest from The Athletic, covers the Indians, has a new book out. We're going to get to that. By the way, you mentioned, Zach, going to Chicago and playing the Cubs and White Sox. Can we just go in there and sweep those bitches? I fucking hate both those teams. Sorry, I got pent up frustration and aggression right now.
We're very professional here.
Can we just beat the anyway? Look, there's nothing. Sorry, that felt good actually doing that.
Maddie, I will never set foot in Wrigley Field again.
Here we go.
That out there for the record. I was invited, the company that I work for is based in Chicago, and a couple years ago when they had interleague play at Wrigley, my boss was like, "Oh, you got to come in for the Tribe." I was like, "I will never walk into that fucking stadium ever again." He's like, "Why? Why? I don't understand." I was upset. I was like, "You're right. You wouldn't understand, but I will never walk into that stadium again." And last year, we had this big customer. We were pitching, and I had to, they wanted us. They were from upstate New York, Albany, and they really wanted to go to a Cubs game, and that's part of my territory. So my boss was like, "Listen, you got to come in. I'm sorry that you're acting like a child, but you have to come in."
Oh, come on.
So I went, and it was, first of all, my skin was crawling every second in there. They still, as it would be here, there's 2016 World Championship shirts and hats and everything in my face. And, all the players still bother me. Rizzo still bothers me. Chris Bryant doesn't really bother me, but they all still bother me. Everything about it. It's just the worst. And do you think that Zach, my question for you is, do you think that there is a day that I will ever get over this?
Well, I'll tell you this. If the Indians play at Wrigley this year, at least it'll be payback for Game 7 because you'll have just as many Cubs fans and Indians fans in the stands. 0 of each.
That's true.
I don't know. But we did a thing on The Athletic this week that was like, we said, what if we're doing a thing where it's like all these what ifs, and we did what if it didn't rain in Game 7, which I think the rain is a little overblown. I think it affected some things, but there were other more prominent bounces or decisions that I think ultimately led to the result. But as so many people have said, they didn't want to read it because they're not over it. And they didn't know if they ever would be. And I've thought so many times this, like the last couple months, if there's ever a time for this franchise to win a World Series, it's going to be this year.
Correct.
And when it's like, it doesn't make sense and it's a weird season and you've got expanded rosters and you're going to have a different playoff format, and you're going to have everybody saying, should this have an asterisk? Should we consider it like a real World Series? It's just like that would be such a Cleveland Indians thing to do to end the drought this year.
Right.
Oh, my gosh, totally. That Jason, hold on.
I read that piece, by the way. Wait, hold on, Matty.
Yeah.
I read that piece, by the way, and it was Jason Lloyd who was really saying that I think the sentence he wrote was like, I don't have any scientific proof, but I truly believe that that rain delay cost the Indians. Now, like Zach said, there were so many different things. I would say that if the pitch before Ben's over singled, he fouled one off and was late. And if J. Ram takes one step to his right, the next pitch is a double play ball in his glove. I would say that that's a bigger thing than the rain delay. But that's just me.
Yeah,
Not
Brian
that I
Shaw
want
would
to
agree
discuss
with you.
Game 7 of the World
I know
Series
that
again
much.
like we did 2 episodes ago when I got all upset again and,
How'd we get on this? How'd we get on this, by the way? This is brutal.
Sorry, it's my fault. It's my fault. Okay. Maddie, go ahead.
That Jason Hayward speech is like Marty freaking Schottenheimer. Oh, my God. If I have to hear one more time about that stupid-ass speech, but that's neither here nor there. What's funny, Zach, about this whole thing with these players? Tony Clark, and I hate to be when I covered him in the late 90s guy, but when I was at DFN and I used to have to stick microphones in his face when he played for the Tigers, the guy never said anything. He was like the world's nicest guy, and he was Captain Cliche. He played on those bad Buddy Bell teams where it was like, all right, Tony, you lost 12-1. You lost 10-1 last night. What do you got to do to turn this thing around? Oh, he's got to come to the ballpark tomorrow and play hard. I mean, just this guy never said shit. Now all of a sudden he's Mr. Tough Guy. Tony, you're going to have to do a revenue share. There's going to have to be some sort of cap, man. I know Scott Boras is basically running the puppet strings, but sorry, for this 82-game season, I don't know how you feel about it, Zach. Players are going to have to deal with it. There's going to have to be a cap for 82. So what? Deal with it.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I understand the player's perspective. I've never understood why owners, I guess they get to where they are because they are greedy and hungry for as much revenue as they can muster. But it's frustrating. It's like, I don't know that owners have a good grasp of, or maybe even the league itself has a good grasp of like where it stands. I mean, the NFL is king, and there's no questioning that. And the NBA has done such a good job at marketing its stars over the last, decade or so, that they're in really good standing too. And with baseball, it's like, it feels like it could go either way. And at some point you have to realize where you stand and how important, how critical it is that you get back on the field no matter what. And take advantage of the fact that you have this captive audience that's waiting for anything.
Right.
I mean, Tiger King. I look back at Tiger King now 8 weeks later, and I'm like, that was such a stupid show. But we had nothing else. Everybody loved it. Imagine if you had actual baseball on the diamond and you could mic up players because you're going to hear them anyway. Like, there's so much potential, and I hope the league understands like what's at stake here, because if you get on the field, it can be a huge boon to your future, and if you don't, it can be absolutely crippling.
And Zach, like to your point, I know Matt and I have discussed this before. This is baseball's chance to be first. Now, you don't want to rush out there, obviously, and have someone get sick and then have to shut the league down. But whatever major sport is first is going to get all of the eyeballs. And this is big. If any sport needed it, like you said, it's baseball. And this is their big chance. My biggest concern, though, is it used to be my biggest concern. Well, obviously health is number one. And I don't know if they'll get all the players on board for whatever they're doing, because not everybody is going to feel like, yeah, I'm willing to risk it. But, Matt brought up the Tony Clark, Scott Boras situation. The other day, Tony Clark had made a comment like, no way. We see this proposal. It's not good. This is just like a salary cap, and they're trying to set us up for next year. Why, heaven forbid, there be an even playing field in the sport where all the teams could actually compete. The Yankees and the Dodgers wouldn't be at such a major advantage over the Indians.
But they are. But Todd, they already are. So, like, for an 82-game season, when the rosters are already set and the salary, for the most part, the salary is already set, to have a cap for 82 games just to go by what the revenue is at 50-50. I don't know how you feel about it, Zach, but to me, I'm actually on the owner's side this time.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on the financial aspect, but I was talking to someone today, and we were thinking about all of the ways that the rules, if you do play this year, will benefit some of those. And it's not just this year. I mean, think about like the Dodgers. If you have a 50-man roster, right, like they can – first of all, they're going to have a universal DH, and the Dodgers are loaded, so that'll benefit them. But, like, they can afford to put some of their top prospects on that roster because they'd rather have them maybe playing or at least practicing with the major league team during the season instead of just wasting a year of development. For the Indians to do that, though, like if they put Nolan Jones on the roster, that's year one of service time. And then what's going to happen? You're potentially going to lose the guy a year earlier than you would have. And like you're also messing with his development because he wasn't going to make the team out of spring training. So there are a lot of benefits to the big markets. I think this is going to have an effect on free agency, which is going to be interesting to follow. I mean, look, the Indians are going to have a lot less revenue this year than they've had in past years, and they would tell you that they don't have enough revenue as it is. So you can probably predict that they're going to trim payroll again moving forward, and that's going to make for some tough decisions on guys like Carlos Santana and Brad Hand and Francisco Lindor and Mike Clevenger and other people. And it's like, this is stuff that the big markets don't have to worry about as much. And so it stinks. It really does. And there's a degree of this throughout the league, but like in Cleveland where they're trying to not rebuild. They don't want to rebuild. They think if they can draft and develop as well as they have been, maybe they can do even better, then they'll never have to rebuild. And they know if they do tear it down to the studs, like you may never get those fans back. And attendance is not great as it is, but it might to the bottom and never recover. So like it's really, really difficult for this front office to try to navigate all this. And like this season being in disarray only complicates matters further.
Matt Dery, Todd Dery, Zack Meisel, Athletic.com, covers the Indians, and of course has a new book out. It is entitled The Personality, Sluggers, and Magic of the 95 Indians. Cleveland Rocked. We got to get into the book and talk some 95 Tribe for sure in a second, Zach. I don't know how much you're talking to the players and texting with guys and people around the team, but what are they doing? I mean, are guys in shape? I know Adam Pletko's like Mr. Social Media. That guy's everywhere, but we're kind of seeing him working out in his backyard. But would these guys be ready? Do you think the Indians would be in good shape?
Yeah, it's different for pitchers and position players, of course. I think every pitcher I've either talked to or seen on social media seems to be in a pretty good spot. I know they all made an agreement that they would pretend like there was going to be spring training in June so that they'd be in shape when that arrived. And it looks like that might be the case now. So the pitching side of things should be good. The position players, it's weird because like a lot of these guys, especially since they had a few weeks of spring training, it's a little bit like riding a bike. I think they can fall out of bed, just get their timing down in, 5 to 7 days and probably be okay. So it's weird. I mean, talking to guys like they're bored. I know a lot of them have young kids, so that I think they've enjoyed that part, being able to be around them when they normally wouldn't. But everyone's just kind of been in purgatory for like 2 months now and just waiting to see what's going to happen. And, they want to know, are they going to get paid how they would, or they want to know, are they going to get service time? And they want to know what sort of training regimen they need. And, if there wasn't a season, like, what the heck were they going to do for the next 6-7 months? So it's very strange. And it seems like pretty much everybody wants to get back on the field. Certainly they want it to be safe, but I think they're all itching to get back.
I saw Emmanuel Classe at the pharmacy at CVS the other day. What an idiot. Gosh. Don't get me started. Sorry.
No, that's just, it's an absolute killer, because he's going to have to serve, I read obviously that the suspension, no matter what happens, he's going to have to serve his 80 games. So if this season ends up being an 80-game season, you're basically getting nothing from him, which is a real shame. And that's one less weapon out of the bullpen, and you were planning on developing him for a year next to Karachek, and building up the potential to have those strong arms, the hard throwers finally for the bullpen that team's been sorely lacking. Now, when we're talking about constructing an actual roster, and they're going to do expansion of the rosters, and they say they're going to potentially have a practice squad, what does this do to the actual minor league teams? Lynchburg and Akron, and the A ball, high A, double A, those type of teams. And I know that there was a lot of talk about shutting down a lot of last year, but minor league baseball shuttering a lot of their teams. What does this do to the long-term viability of minor league baseball?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think anyone really knows. It's certainly like those teams in those small towns, like you're talking Lynchburg and Eastlake, and like they can't afford to lose an entire season. They get nothing out of this. And I don't know. I mean, it sounds like, I know a lot of people have speculated that maybe, especially now that Arizona has reopened for athletics, like maybe they can send a bunch of players to the complex in Arizona, and they can play either intra-squad scrimmages or just play other teams, minor leaguers. But yeah, it stinks for everybody. I mean, you take, like, the Indians are loaded with 18 and 19-year-old, especially position players.
Right.
And, like, that is a key time in your development, and you just lose a year. And, like, maybe they'll get to do some things in Arizona or whatever, but, like, that is just absolutely critical. And it hurts the Indians, and they have to kind of revamp their whole timeline now and what they project out. And, like, okay, well, Brian Rocchio, maybe he won't be ready now until 2023. Like, you have to, there's a ripple effect here. So and again, this hurts every team, but there are teams that have more resources to compensate for this. And so, yeah, it hurts. I really don't know. I'm curious to see what teams do if you have like a 30-man roster and then a 20-man taxi squad, and you just have 30 players active every night. Like, I'm curious to see what teams do with their top prospects. Like, do you want them just wasting away for a year, or do you want to get them a little bit of exposure, but it's like they might not quite be ready, and it's not like they can go to AAA and tear the cover off the ball for 3 weeks and then get promoted. Like, I think it's either going to be you're there day one or you're not. So there's a ton of questions. It's going to be really interesting if they do come to an agreement here to see exactly what is written in it in terms of roster construction and kind of the after effects for the minor leaguers.
I think the most important question is, have you had Raising Cane's chicken lately?
So not lately, but it's a pretty regular. It's in the rotation. And let me say, they opened one in Strongsville, where I live, a year ago. And like the first month it was open, they had to have, it's on a pretty main road, and they had cops in the street directing traffic around it because it was so crowded.
We talking cops plural?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Man, that sauce is good. Todd, you got to tell, I'm waiting for my gift cards, by the way. Are they on the way?
They're sitting in my house. Are we really going to do that on the air? Yes, I will send them in the mail.
I mean, what's funny is
I did get them. my great friend who hooked us up with the sponsorship. She provided the payola, as they say. So we're all good. But yes, I will send them to you.
I'm excited.
It's dipping sauce. Zach, are you big into the dipping sauce?
Yeah, but like I honestly don't even think it needs it. The chicken is just like it's a 10 out of 10 every single time.
Is this guy a pro or what? See? Why doesn't he have his own show? Why doesn't he have his own show on The Fan? I'll call Andy Roth right now.
We teed that one right up, and he just crushed it like Albert Bell in 1995. I mean, pretty good. I'll say this, and this is a good way to transition into the book. So I got my copy yesterday, Zach, on the Kindle app, and happy to take my money, please. I'm happy to do it, especially for coming on to the podcast. But I mean, there is no better subject for an Indians fan who is, in our age group than to talk about the 95 Indians. First of all, how old were you in 95?
So I turned 6 that summer, but the story I've been telling,
6?
because I have no idea if this is 100% accurate, but it's what I remember. The first baseball game I ever remember watching on TV is Game 6 of that World Series. And it was I was watching it with my grandma. I don't know where my parents were. I don't know why this was the setup. And we weren't even at my grandma's house. We were at her friend's house. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. But that's like my first memory of any sports whatsoever. And so that's it. I mean, it was a no-brainer to write this just because of what that team meant. It's the 25-year anniversary. I had enough of a rapport with a lot of the guys, but it just seemed right since that was my first memory, and it was the perfect introduction a kid could have.
Tell me about, all right, so getting people on the record, off the record, whatever, to contribute to the book. How difficult was that? How easy was that? I'm sure you got in the question about, Albert Bell and everything else and trying to get a hold of him. What kind of an adventure was writing this thing?
It was easier than you would think. I think a lot of guys, I mean, aside from the final result, there's nothing but fond memories about that season. So everybody wanted to reminisce and just share what they remembered. And so it was pretty easy. And the good thing is, so many of those guys are still affiliated with the team in some way. So whether it's, Carlos Baerga being an instructor, or so many guys who come back as the alumni ambassadors, they're all still a part of it. And I think that also keeps them invested. So they were willing to talk and share some of those good memories. What was interesting was talking to the non-main guys, getting guys like Paul Shuey, who was basically a rookie that year, and him talking about his eyes lighting up when he's listening to Eddie Murray and Dave Winfield talk hitting in the dugout, or some of the coaches, and just because we've all the stories. I mean, we've heard about Albert Bell and the thermostat. We know about the biceps. We know about Carlos Baerga hitting the town and the strike zone in the World Series. But it's the perspectives from some of the people that we have never really heard. I think that was kind of the most rewarding part.
And of those guys, who did you find the most random, who gave you, bits of information that you didn't know? And I'm not talking about, the Jim Thomes of the world. I'm talking about, I don't know, Ruben Amaro, for example, people like that. But, what person did you find the most interesting in none of the major players that gave you the best info?
Probably Mark Wiley, the pitching coach. The pitching on that team got no attention. They led the American League in ERA. The bullpen was absolutely dominant, and not just Jose Mesa. Plunk was really good. People don't realize that. Asemacher was great. Tavares was phenomenal. And, the rotation was solid. But I thought Mark Wiley, he was the one guy who, took months and months to finally crack down. And then when I did, he was phenomenal. And I didn't want him to stop talking. But he just had such great insight into the pitching, and nobody ever gives insight into the pitching on that team. And just him talking about, like, I remember he was telling some stories about, like, the first day of spring training, because that team in 94 was just starting to find its stride. You have the strike. Who knows what would have happened? And then they're all sitting around for 8 months just waiting for baseball to come back because they got a taste of it. And they knew they were good, and they wanted to see how good they could be. And so they get there the first day of spring training, and, like, every hitter is just in peak shape already and just launching home run after home run off their pitching staff. And it was cool hearing him kind of reflect on being mesmerized. And that's when he knew, like, holy shit, this lineup could be incredible. But yeah, he was pretty insightful. It was interesting listening, and he gave him and Hargrove gave some good insight into, like, how Jose Mesa became the closer, because they were kind of on the fence for the first month of the season. Yeah, I think Wiley, I never would have imagined, like, that he'd have that interesting of a perspective, because you don't pay attention to what that pitching staff accomplished.
Zach,
you know what? I'll be honest. So, Matt, that was going into my sophomore year of college, and I was actually home for the semester in the fall of 95. And Matt was also at home living back. We both moved back in with our parents. Matt was working at WHK 1420, the big one, the large one, the Giants.
Rest in peace.
Covering the team. So that was, like, right in our wheelhouse. And I got to be honest, I went that year. I went to at least 40 games. We had season tickets, and I don't think I could have named Mark Wiley as the pitching coach if you asked me today. I think I would have said Phil Regan. I don't know why, but I don't even remember Mark Wiley. And, like, I could tell you, Rick Adair was the pitching coach in the 80s. I remember that, but I don't even remember Mark Wiley. So that should tell you, that everybody, you're totally right about how everybody just, was all in on the offense. It's so true. And you almost forget that, who the 5 starters were, for example. It's pretty crazy. That team was just absolutely incredible. And I'll tell you what else. You did last night when I got the book, I read the first 3 chapters. You did a really good job of setting up how they got to 95. And I made a couple of notes that I thought were really, truly amazing. So 1991, the Indians moved the fences back, which, as Matt and I both remember, was for the great Alex Cole, the center fielder, the goggled center fielder who was supposed to be what Kenny Lofton eventually became.
Right.
They moved the fences back for him. And remember, Matt, they put up that fence. It was also high and had, like, the diagonal, like, octagonal.
Stupidest thing I've ever seen. Oh, yeah, in dead center field at the old stadium.
So in 1991, Matt, the stat was in the book. How many home runs do you think the Indians hit in 82 home games?
Oh gosh, was it in the 70s?
How about 22?
That's it?
According to heralded author Zack Meisel, 22 homers.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
Is that nuts?
That team was so bad.
Oh,
but
wow.
that was the year they all say that they knew they were on the right track.
I read it again because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a misprint.
That's crazy.
You really did a great job in talking about how horrible the old stadium was, and when basically how it was built with Hank Peters and John Hart and the contracts and what they signed and what they really started to see in 1992, which I think most people probably don't know and need your book to get that backstory, which I thought was great. The other thing I wanted to touch on with you, Zach, is you wrote an article actually for The Athletic about Kenny Lofton. So obviously how he basically was off of the Hall of Fame ballot in 1 year. Without giving everything away, you compared him to other people in his time. Why do you think it is that when he basically was on an equal playing field in terms of F4, the Mike Piazza and Craig Biggio, who were both first ballot Hall of Famers, how does he only get 18 votes and get off of the ballot after 1 year?
It was just that was the year Bonds, Clemens, and Sosa landed on the ballot too, and I think he just got overlooked. Everybody was so paranoid about, are you going to vote for the steroid guys? Are you not going to vote for them? that no one else was considered. I mean, nobody got elected that year. But I also think there's been a change in maybe the criteria people use probably in the last 5 years, where I think people pay more attention to advanced statistics and just giving more appreciation to like defense and speed and that sort of thing. It's not just about 3,000 hits, 300 wins, 500 home runs. And it's incredible. I mean, Lofton was like the absolute ideal center fielder for about 9 years, and like had Hall of Fame numbers during that time. But he was always overshadowed by Albert Bell, Manny Ramirez, Jim Thome, guys who hit home runs in the middle of the lineup. And maybe he didn't get enough credit because, yeah, he was the table setter, but like in 99, the Indians scored 1,000 runs. No team does that. And so it wasn't just Lofton who was setting the table and scoring those runs. It was everybody. And I think that probably hurt him. Also, in the second half of his career, I know you guys talked about it, was it last podcast or the one before, but he played for 9 teams in 6 years.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, he wasn't able to get established. And it's what people don't realize is the reason he played for that many teams is he kept getting traded to contenders because people wanted him. This is the biggest gripe I have in the Omar Vizquel debate, where I don't have a ballot yet. I'm kind of grateful that I don't. But people penalize him for playing for 24 years. And I'm like, if teams want this guy at 43 years old to play shortstop, that says something about him. That should be like something in his favor. And I think with Kenny, it's similar in that teams kept wanting him for their playoff runs. Like he was traded 3 times in the last 6 years of his career in the middle of the season. All 3 times, he ended up starting in the outfield and playing every inning of every postseason game for those 3 teams. So it's not like he was just a nomad and was bouncing around because he couldn't find anywhere to stick. He was bouncing around because he was that coveted.
The book is called Cleveland Rocked, all about the 95 team. So Todd's got the book, obviously. I'm going to get it. What was the Albert? Were there conversations with Albert Bell? Did he talk to you?
There were conversations with Albert Bell. It went about as expected, where he was extremely curious as to what my angle was and my motive, and wanted to know where I would be selling the book and how much I'd be selling it for, and how many copies I'd be selling.
What?
Come on, really? Are you serious?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It got to it's the good thing about doing something like this is often other people are going to give you much better stuff about whatever you're writing about. It's like I'd much rather hear Kenny Lofton's take on the thermostat situation than Albert Bell's, because I know it's going to be unbiased and it's going to be what actually happened. And the interesting thing too, and like Dan O'Dowd had some really, really fascinating stuff to say about Albert, especially about when he was coming up through the minors. I think that's further into the book, Todd. I don't think you're there yet, but like 95, Albert Bell, nobody had a problem with him. Like, yeah, he had antics. I think that was the year he did the thermostat. I think that was the year where he threw the baseball, or he chastised the reporter in the dugout. Like, he had his antics, but it was never anything that took away from what the team was doing. And Mike Hargrove even said that. And this is the thing that this was probably the most surprising thing I came across. Hargrove was like, there was never anything that like got in the way. And like, it was a clubhouse full of like, it's not like everybody got along. It's not like, that clubhouse was a freaking circus in the afternoons. But when it came time to first pitch, everybody was on the same page. They were all focused. They were obsessed with winning because, like I said, they had gotten that taste of it and they wanted to see how good they could be. And they clinched on September 8th. And nobody wants out of the lineup for the last 3 weeks. They want to get to 100 wins. Albert Bell wants to get to 50 home runs and 50 doubles and put up an MVP caliber stat line. Like, it's interesting. And like, they had conversations a few years before that, before 95, when they considered cutting ties with Albert Bell because they didn't want to put up with his antics. But then when it got to 95 and like, you had veterans to keep people in line, you had everybody just on that mission. Like it wasn't like it was quiet and peaceful, but it was peaceful enough. I think Kenny Lofton called it fun chaos.
Who was the one guy? Maybe it wasn't Hargrove, and we've seen specials done where guys like Dave Justice and others have talked about the '97 team, or even further past, where they've said Hargrove basically rolled the ball out and the guys went and played. But in '95, especially, and like you said early on, I mean, because there were the veterans there, the Dennis Martinez's, like you mentioned, Winfield and Eddie and guys like that. Were those the guys that had to keep Albert in line?
Yeah, those guys. I think Wayne Kirby and Alvaro Espinoza, a lot of teammates credited those two as well. I heard you guys talking about Hargrove, and I mean, if the players said that later in that 90s tenure that was the case, then I believe it. I do think in 95 it was different because they hadn't made the playoffs yet. They didn't know exactly what it required to kind of navigate through a season and navigate through October. So I do think Hargrove had a pretty good command of the clubhouse that year. He told them, you guys can do whatever the hell you want, and then like at 6 o'clock, an hour before first pitch, you're on my time, and then you do what I say. And it seemed like they listened to that, at least in 95. And then I think, I mean, it's similar to like fans love that 95 team, and everything was hunky-dory, and even when they lose the World Series, they still had a parade downtown. But they hadn't like disappointed yet. And in 96 they lose in the first round, in 97 they have another heartbreak. And it's like that sense of urgency increases and your patience decreases. And so I think it's similar with the manager as it is to probably how the fans treat a team. Like in 2016, I think fans were disappointed in the end result, but everyone was thinking, okay, they'll be back. Like this is year one of this. And then 2017, they lose in the first round. And it's like, oh, okay, no more screwing around. Like this is getting we're getting desperate here. So it was the same thing. It was like in 95, it was all new. Like they needed that leader to guide them through it because they hadn't been through it before.
That's a great call because I can recall in 95 when we lost in the World Series in 95. I shouldn't say we, but yeah, I don't care. I'm a fan. Yeah. When the Indians lost in 95, I remember thinking, well, we'll be back next year. This team is just on the cusp. Everyone will pick us to win next year. It'll be fine. Then 96, they lose in the first round. Albert leaves, and then they come back in 97, and it's the 86 win team that gets the World Series. And to me, that's the most devastating. I mean, I'm more devastated by that actually still to this day than I am with 16. They're close, but the 97 one is more disappointing because that 90s group will always hold, and this is why this book is going to be so successful for you, because as Matt and I have discussed many times, I would say that 70% of the Indians current fan base doesn't even know baseball existed before 1994 in Cleveland.
I feel like I didn't either. I mean, it's amazing when you think about they were so dreadful for 40 years, and it was like, I mean, it was the perfect storm. Like you got a taste of it in 94 in the new ballpark. So everybody was anticipating 95, wanted to see how good they could be. And then you throw in the fact that they had all these larger-than-life personalities. They had the perfect veteran complements on the roster. And they win 100 games, and they do it in dramatic fashion so often. Like it was we couldn't script it better except for the ending.
So,
wait, Matt, let me do one more question for Zach.
Yes.
I have one more, and then I'll let you finish. The one thing I did not realize in the time, and that I learned in your book, was just how close the Indians were to actually leaving Cleveland before Gateway was built. I know you did a lot of research on that. Issue 2, which was basically voting on whether or not Gateway should be built, only passed 51 to 48%. Do you believe, after doing all the research and talking to all the people, that indeed the Indians would have left had Gateway not passed?
I have no reason to believe otherwise. It's a little hard for me to definitively say yes just because I wasn't around, and I feel like I would have had a better grasp of the situation if I was. But from all accounts, like Dick Jacobs did not want to be a tenant at Brown Stadium, and it was just, I mean, it was miserable. Everybody hated everything about that place, and the fact that they were like just a tenant, and it was like, okay, you finish your game, and then the second that the game's over, they start sculpting the field for football. Like, and it was terrible, and the front offices were absolutely atrocious. So they wanted to get out of there, and it sounded like Dick Jacobs was just going to, like, whatever it took to get out of there, he was going to do. And I mean, I'll say this: the people in Denver and in Tampa certainly thought they had about a 50-50 shot of getting the Indians if it didn't pass. So, yeah, that's another what if that maybe someone will explore someday, because who knows what would have happened, and if would Cleveland have eventually gotten a new team at some point? Who knows?
You realize we're 45 minutes into this thing and we have not mentioned Dolans Cheap? That's the one thing about this pandemic. It's kept the Dolans Cheap crowd pretty quiet.
Do you guys think Lindor gets traded July 2nd or July 3rd?
Oh, man.
I still maintain that the time to trade him was this offseason, and now with the pandemic and the fact that there's going to be, a half season at best, your leverage is going to be not great. Not great, Bob, as they would say. Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, we're just busting all the old bits out now. Dolan, Lindor. What about the wood shop? We got to get into that.
I was just going to say, you want to talk about the wood shop?
So wait, if you're
going to go into a restaurant this year, Deez?
Well, I could call Eric and get carry out. I'd have to
get some carry out.
Where's Zach? And where are you going to be, Zach? Downtown, Birmingham? Where they put you up when the tribe comes in to face those juggernaut Tigers?
Well, I usually stay downtown, a short drive away from my haunt, Slo's Barbecue. But you've been telling me for years that your spot is better than Slo's.
It is. It's not even close. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, and I get it. And see, Slo's did the smart thing. They now cater the Lions press box, so all the media slaps are like, "Oh, Slo's," and they're taking pictures on their phones and then posting it on Twitter. So that's a win for them. But I'm telling you, I would be willing to hike up to Clarkston and bring the food down. We got to find a way to reheat it in the hotel, though. Who even knows that this is all even going to happen?
I was going to say, the real question is, will Zach be able to travel with the team or anybody? Like, that's another thing, Zach. Have they mentioned anything to you at all about, well, if we do this, it's going to be these three, it'll be the Matt Underwood and Andre Knott and Rick Manning and then three other people. You know what I mean? Like, how are they even going to go about that and allowing access to the actual players if they're going to give you access to the players? Have you heard anything at all?
No, and there was a media contingent discussing this exact question yesterday. Are they going to let every radio and TV broadcast crew travel with the team? I mean, that normally happens, but you're probably going to need a bigger crew than normal because this is the TV that's the only revenue you're going to get this year. So you're going to want to make sure it's perfect and capitalizing on every single eyeball that's going to be tuned in. And not just that, but like, are you going to let do you want as many people in this bubble as possible? Do you want outsiders like reporters covering these games? Nobody knows. So it's a good question.
Any truth to the rumor that if the opener is Indians in Detroit, that you and Al Pulowski will be driving together?
I don't know. That's a good question.
See, now we're getting somewhere.
In all seriousness, they might want to cut down on the amount of people. Like, I know in Oakland, for example, my grade school buddy Dave Cavell got rid of the radio and was only doing streaming this year. So, and he was doing a streaming version of the audio from the television. I mean, they could very easily say you get one crew and it'll be the TV crew, and if you want it on radio, it'll be simulcast.
Hold on. If the Indians are playing and Tom Hamilton is not in the building, there's something wrong. So sorry.
With you, I would. You know my feelings. I would absolutely want to hear Hammy over Underwood, but that's a conversation that will probably have to be had.
Could you imagine hold on, how about no fans in the stands, Bauer on the mound for the Reds, and Hammy doing the game? You know, Hammy will be Bauer will hear Tom Hamilton up in the booth.
Yeah, I've talked to Hammy. I feel like once a week I get a text from him, and it just reminds me that he's going absolutely stir crazy right now.
Oh, God, could you imagine?
Losing his mind.
Could you imagine? That would be awesome, though.
It's got to be killing him.
Oh, he's got to be there. Well, we'll figure it out. I mean, I wonder if, like you said, you wonder about the numbers and how many media members would be allowed in there. I'm assuming Paul Hoynes gets first crack.
If you want, I mean, he might be more susceptible to the virus, and that's the thing too. Like, do you want? There's not going to be clubhouse access. I mean,
no way.
Shocked, right? So, is it okay if a handful, or it's not like the Indians media contingent is large anyway. There's 2 or 3 of us on the road everywhere we go. So, can you let 2 or 3 people into the press box and 6 feet away from that night's starting pitcher after the game? I don't know. And then if you allow that, what are you going to do about the Yankees who have 25 traveling writers? It's a mess. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, no media, you can talk to the starting pitcher on Zoom after the game, and otherwise you're on your own.
Would Mandy Bell be willing to have some Union Woodshop barbecue with us, or is she just strictly Panda Express?
No, let me tell you, I have seen her
These are real questions.
A 24-ounce porterhouse steak, every millimeter of it.
Wow.
So I would think that the wood shop would be definitely a possibility.
All right. We're going to have to figure this all out. I mean, right now they're...
Importantly, better third-string catcher in 95, Jesse Levis or Scooter Tucker?
So, I kid you not, my podcast partner, TJ Zupi, texted me this morning. I think he received the book, and the first text he sent me was, if Jesse Levis isn't quoted in this book, it's trash.
That's a good line.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love it.
All right, man. Well, all love for the book and continued success. Thanks for coming on for 50-plus minutes with us and shooting the shit a little bit. Hopefully we'll be reading you, writing some game stories, and certainly who knows where this is going to go. But we appreciate your friendship, man.
Appreciate you guys, and of course, once again, congratulations on being one of the podcasts to. Well, what was the headline? Podcast you need to listen to.
To listen to in Cleveland.
Wow.
We can hardly believe it either.
Well,
you guys deserve it.
Selby as Godcast got robbed, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we're small. That's okay.
I don't know about that. I like the logo, and you have your own Twitter page, although I guess we do too, but that's neither here nor there. Zack Meisel, thanks, buddy.
You got it, fellas.
There he is, Zack Meisel from The Athletic. Todd, that was a lot of fun. Who knows when we'll be back on again, and maybe we'll come back on when we know what's happening with Major League Baseball. But we're, of course, always on waitingfornextyear.com. That's where you find us. Subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts. Find us on Spotify. And also, thanks to our friends at Raising Cane's and Dr. Ben Hornstein at the Center for Advanced Dentistry. Big news today. He has a new client. Mr. Meisel will be coming over from Strongsville. All right, we'll talk to you again soon.